Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? Not because anyone was unkind, not because they said something hurtful, but simply because no one really saw you. Maybe you were at a family gathering, the room was full of laughter, conversations, clinking silverware. Yet somehow, you felt like a shadow on the wall. People smiled, passed the dishes, made small talk, but no one asked how you were doing. Not really. It's a quiet kind of loneliness. One that sneaks in even when you're surrounded by those you love. It doesn't shout, it doesn't cry. It just settles quietly in your chest and whispers, "I don't think they see me anymore." And here's the thing, you're not alone. So many older adults carry this feeling. Not because they've changed, but because the world around them has shifted. The pace is faster. The focus is elsewhere. And somewhere along the way, your presence, your wisdom, your stories, your voice starts to fade into the background. But let me tell you something important. You are not fading. You are still here. And what you feel is not a weakness. It's a sign that you still long to be seen, heard, and valued. In this video, we're going to uncover the hidden reasons behind this feeling, the emotional truths many seniors live with but rarely speak about. And by the end, I hope you'll feel a little lighter and a lot less alone. If you've ever felt that quiet ache of being overlooked, you're not imagining it. It's real. And more importantly, it's shared. So many older adults, especially after 70 or 80, begin to notice a subtle but painful shift in how the world responds to them. Conversations become shorter. Invitations come less often. When you do speak, people sometimes smile politely, but their eyes drift elsewhere. You start to wonder, did I become less important or did they just stop seeing me? But here's the truth. You haven't done anything wrong. This experience isn't about your worth. It's about the emotional and social shifts that come with aging shifts no one really prepares us for. As we grow older, life naturally becomes keyed. Social circles shrink. Roles that once gave us identity, being a parent, a worker, a host, a caregiver, start to fade. And without those roles, it's easy to feel like you've faded too. But you haven't. What's fading is the world's ability to slow down and listen. You still carry wisdom that took decades to earn. You still have a story that matters. You still deserve to feel seen, not for what you do, but simply for who you are. This video isn't about fixing you. It's about revealing what no one talks about, the hidden emotional landscape of growing older. Once you understand it, you can begin to make peace with it, and maybe even find strength in places you didn't expect. There's a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from the body. It comes from the heart. As we grow older, maintaining relationships can become quietly exhausting. Not because we've stopped loving people, but because the emotional effort it takes to stay connected, to check in, to show up, to make conversation, starts to outweigh the joy it once brought. Psychologists call this relational fatigue. It's the emotional weariness that builds up after decades of giving, listening, helping, and being present for others. At some point, even the most social person may start to feel like their tank is running low. Take Irene, for example, an 80-year-old woman who used to host game nights every Friday for friends and neighbors. Her home was always filled with voices, snacks, and laughter. But lately, she finds herself saying no to invitations more often. Not because she doesn't care, but because the idea of small talk, of staying on, of pretending to be energetic when she's not, just feels like too much. It's not depression. It's not bitterness. It's just tiredness, the kind that comes from giving too much, too long, without enough rest in between. With age, we begin to prioritize peace. We crave stillness, not because we're withdrawing from life, but because we're learning to protect what little emotional energy we have. It's no longer about being everywhere for everyone. It's about being present for what truly matters. What many people don't realize is that older adults often still love deeply, but they now love quietly, selectively, and with intention. They've learned that not every relationship needs to be maintained, and not every invitation deserves a yes. Relational fatigue isn't failure. It's wisdom. It's your heart asking for permission to rest, to be more intentional with your time, to choose quality over quantity. And the beautiful thing is when you listen to that need, you often discover that fewer relationships, nurtured well, can bring more peace than a full calendar ever could. There's a quiet kind of pain that comes not from being alone, but from being unseen. Even when you're surrounded by people, it happens in the middle of conversations. You share a memory, a concern, or even a small joke, and someone cuts in or smiles vaguely and changes the subject. You repeat yourself just in case they didn't hear you, but deep down, they heard. They just didn't listen. This is what emotional invisibility feels like. You're present. You're speaking, but you're not being received. Take Mr. Gerald, a 9-year-old grandfather with a deep, kind voice and a lifetime of stories. At family dinners, he tries to chime in about his time in the army, or how he built his first home with his bare hands. But halfway through, someone pulls out a phone, the kids get up from the table, or a younger relative says, "Oh wow, that's cool." Before asking Alexa to play music, he smiles. But inside, something goes quiet. Over time, those moments start to add up. You begin to feel less like a participant in your own family and more like a background detail. You sit through conversations where no one asks you questions. You try to share a thought but hesitate because what's the point? If no one truly hears it, this form of invisibility is hard to name. It's not cruel. No one's yelling. No one's saying you don't matter. But it's in the subtle things, the distracted glances, the half-hearted nods, the way the room moves on without you. Psychologists call this emotional invalidation, when your feelings or experiences are dismissed, ignored, or minimized. It doesn't always come with bad intentions, but the impact is real. It chips away at your sense of connection. It makes you wonder if your presence truly matters anymore. And for older adults, this experience can be especially painful. You've lived through decades of change. You've raised children, survived loss, built a life from scratch. You carry insights that no book or video could ever teach. But now, in a world that moves faster, talks louder, and rarely pauses, your voice risks fading into the noise. But here's what I want you to remember. Your words still matter. Your stories still matter. The problem isn't your voice. The problem is the world's attention, because being heard isn't just about sound. It's about being seen, and while you may not always be heard in the places you once were, that doesn't mean your voice is gone. It simply means you may need to seek or create spaces where people choose to listen. A neighbor who loves your stories, a support group that values wisdom, even a journal where your thoughts can live fully and unapologetically, and no matter how the world changes around you, the truth remains, you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard, just as you are. Of all the quiet thoughts that live in the minds of older adults, few are more persistent or more painful than this one. I don't want to bother anyone. It starts as a kind gesture. You tell yourself, they're busy, or they've got enough on their plate. You wait for them to call instead of reaching out. You tell your children, don't worry about me, even when you do need something. You cancel plans because you don't want someone to go out of their way. Over time, this small habit of silence becomes a lifestyle. You ask for less. you accept less, and one day you wake up and realize you've started disappearing from your own life. This is what we call the burden illusion. The belief that needing help, attention, or company somehow makes you a problem. It's not just about avoiding inconvenience. It's deeper than that. Many seniors grew up in generations where independence was a virtue. You were taught to carry your load, not to complain, and to be strong by handling things on your own. And while that strength carried you through life's storms, it also taught you one dangerous idea, that needing others makes you weak. But let's pause here. Think about a time when someone you love asked you for help, maybe your child, a friend, a neighbor. Did you think they were a burden? You felt honored, needed, trusted. So why do we assume that when we ask for help, we become a weight? The burden illusion thrives in silence. The less you say, the more the idea grows. You begin to think they're not calling because they're tired of me. Or they didn't invite me because I slow things down. But in truth, the people who love you may simply think they're okay. They'd tell me if they needed something. This misunderstanding on both sides creates distance, not because love is gone, but because both parties are trying to protect each other from discomfort. Let's take the story of Ems. Lillian. She's 83, lives alone, and hasn't told her daughter that she's been having trouble lifting groceries up the stairs. She works so hard, Lillian says, and I don't want her to think I can't manage. So instead, she skips certain meals, avoids shopping altogether, and quietly struggles. But what if Lillian's daughter knew? What if she would gladly bring groceries once a week? If only she knew her mother needed it. Here's the truth. Letting someone help you is also a way of loving them. You give them the gift of presence, of purpose, of closeness. You show trust, and you remind them that even in your wisdom, your years, your independence, you are still human, still open, still connected. Asking for help doesn't make you a burden. It makes you visible. When you raise your hand, even just a little, you give others a chance to step closer, not out of duty, but out of care. So the next time that old thought whispers, "Don't bother anyone," try replying, "I'm not bothering them. I'm inviting them in." And that, my friend, is not weakness. That is bravery in its most beautiful form. Some of the most beautiful treasures we carry through life are the stories we've lived. The day you got married, the songs you danced to in your 20s, the smell of your grandmother's kitchen, the long nights you spent waiting for someone you love to walk safely through the door. These stories are not just memories. They are threads that weave together your identity, evidence of a life richly lived. And yet, many older adults find that these stories no longer have a place to land. They sit quietly in the corners of our minds, waiting for someone to ask, someone to lean in and say, "Tell me more." Instead, what you often get is a polite smile, a distracted nod, or the familiar phrase, "That was before my time." It's not meant to hurt. But over time, this subtle disinterest creates what we call the story gap, a growing space between generations, where your past begins to feel disconnected from their present. And that gap, while silent, can be deeply painful. It's not that younger people don't care. It's that the world they live in runs faster. It's a world of short messages, quick updates, and endless distractions. In such a world, slow stories, the kind that unfold over coffee, with pauses and details, and feelings struggle to survive. And so, many older adults begin to speak less, not because their stories have lost value, but because it feels like no one is really listening. Take Mr. Alvin, for example. Every morning, he sits by his window with a warm cup of coffee, thinking back to his days working on the railroads. One afternoon, He began telling his grandson about working 14-hour shifts in the freezing cold, laying tracks with bare hands. Halfway through, the boy checked his phone. Alvin smiled and said softly, "Maybe another time." But there wasn't another time. Not because his grandson didn't love him, but because no one had taught him how to slow down long enough to hear a story told with care. That's the heartbreaking part of the story gap. When no one asks about your past, you begin to wonder if it even matters. And if your story doesn't matter, what does that say about you? But here's something important. Your stories do matter. They carry truth, perspective, and wisdom that no podcast or article can replace. They are living lessons wrapped in memory. Just because the world isn't asking for them now doesn't mean they have no value. In fact, the quiet power of your story might be more needed than ever, especially in a world that's forgotten how to slow down and listen. Because the truth is, you are not out of touch. The world is out of rhythm. So what can you do? You can begin by honoring your own voice. Write your memories down, even if it's just a few lines a day. Record your voice telling them, not for the world, but for yourself. Share with one trusted friend, a grandchild who's curious, or even a local group that values lived experience. You don't need a big audience. You just need one open heart. And your life, it's not just history, it's legacy. It doesn't happen with a bang. It happens quietly, gradually. There's no announcement, no argument, no clear moment when things change. It's more like a gentle dimming, so subtle that you don't even notice it at first. One day, the house is full of noise and visits and little surprises. The phone rings often. Friends call. The grandkids drop by after school. There's movement, warmth, life, and then, without realizing it, that rhythm begins to shift. The calls become less frequent, the visits more spaced out. People are still kind but busy. Everyone seems to have something going on. Days pass. Then weeks. You look at your phone and realize it's been a while since anyone called, just to talk. The house isn't necessarily sad. It's just quiet, still. And slowly, that quiet starts to creep inward. It's not just in your living room, it settles into your chest, your thoughts, your sense of self. This is what we call the quiet fade. Not rejection, not abandonment, just a slow, almost invisible fading out of attention, connection, and presence. It happens when the world doesn't turn its back on you, but simply stops turning toward you. At first, you explain it away. They're busy. They mean well. And it's true, they do. Your kids are balancing jobs, bills, parenting. Your friends are dealing with their own health or moving away. The grandchildren have grown into their own lives. It makes sense, but sense doesn't always bring comfort. Because even when we understand why something is happening, we can still feel the sting of it. You start to wonder, not with bitterness, but with quiet ache, if anyone still thinks about you in the in-between moments, not just on holidays or birthdays, but on regular Wednesdays. The kind of day when someone used to stop by for coffee or call just to ask how you slept. And here's what's most painful about the quiet fade. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It shows up in the empty chair across the table, in the unanswered message, in the birthday card that never came. It's not loud, but it's heavy. And with every small moment of silence, you start to feel a little less central in the lives of others. Not forgotten exactly, just faded. That fading can chip away at your self-worth, not because you've changed, but because your role in others' lives had. You used to be the center, the host of family dinners, the one who remembered everyone's favorite dish, the first person people called for advice. Now you feel like an afterthought, like the party's still going, but you're no longer on the guest list. It's important to name this feeling because many older adults carry it quietly, thinking, but it's not just you. The quiet fade is common and real. And it's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of how the modern world forgets to pause. It forgets to slow down long enough to recognize that wisdom doesn't shout and presence doesn't beg. Sometimes, it just waits with quiet grace to be invited back in. But here's what I want you to remember. Your worth has never depended on how many people call you or how often you're invited. You mattered before the phone rang, and you still matter now. You are not less valuable because the world moves fast. You are not invisible just because others are distracted. Even when things grow quiet around you, your presence, your story, your heart still hold weight. You are part of the roots in someone's life, even if they don't water that root every day. And roots, they remain. They keep the whole thing standing. So if you find yourself in a quiet season, know this: you are not forgotten. You are not fading. You are simply holding a light steady and strong in a world that sometimes looks away, but always comes back. Let's pause here for a moment, not to dwell on sadness, but to breathe, to remind you of something simple and powerful. You're not broken. You've just changed. Life after threats, T-shirt, 80 isn't a slow decline. It's a new chapter. Yes, some things get quieter. Yes, people come and go, but none of that means you've lost your worth. What it means is that your role in the world has shifted, not disappeared. You are not who you were at 40, but why should you be? You are wiser now. Gentler, more observant. You've let go of certain battles, made peace with certain truths, and learned how to sit with silence without fear. That isn't weakness, that's growth. Maybe you don't move as fast. Maybe your phone doesn't ring as often, but your presence still carries weight. When you speak, it matters. When you show up, it counts. And when you sit in a room, even silently, people feel it. You may not be at the center of the action, but you are the foundation underneath it. Quiet strength, deep roots, a steady light. So if the world around you feels different, it's not because you're fading. It's because you're in a different season now. One that asks for stillness, reflection, and grace. And in this season, you are not broken. You are becoming. If you've been feeling more invisible lately, wondering where you fit in this fast-moving world, let this be your reminder that what you feel is not only real, it's valid. The quiet ache, the pause when no one calls, the sense that the world keeps going while you're slowly fading from its center. These are honest emotions. You are not being too sensitive, and you are not imagining things. You are simply experiencing the natural human response to growing older in a world that often forgets how to slow down. But this isn't the end of your story. In fact, it's only a part of it. While yes, the calls may be fewer and the visits may not come as often, your value has not changed. You are still deeply needed, not just for what you've done in the past, but for who you are right now. You're needed for your presence, the calm you bring into a room, the wisdom in your quiet listening, the steadiness of your love. Maybe your name isn't on everyone's calendar anymore, but your imprint lives on. In someone's routines, their memories, their small moments of comfort. You are the way someone makes tea, the song someone hums, the advice someone still hears in their head when facing something hard. You are the root, not the noise. You are the steady light, not the flicker. And even in this quieter season of life, your presence still carries weight. You don't have to pretend that the loneliness doesn't sting. You don't have to dismiss the ache. But don't stop there, because even when the world seems to look away, you're still here. You still matter, And there is still more life left to be lived at your pace, in your way, with the quiet dignity that only someone like you can carry. If you've reached this point in the video, I just want to take a quiet moment to say thank you, not just for watching, but for being here, for still choosing to show up in a world that often overlooks people who have lived the most. It takes courage to grow older, to keep loving when others drift away, to keep hoping even when life feels quiet. And if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten, I want to gently remind you, your story matters. The way you've lived, the people you've loved, the lessons you've learned, they all carry meaning, even if no one says it out loud. Even if the phone doesn't ring or the door doesn't knock, your life continues to leave an imprint in ways that are quiet but lasting. You may not see it, but someone has made tea the way you used to. Someone hums the song you once sang. Someone remembers your kindness on a hard day. The world might be loud and fast now, but there are still spaces like this one where your voice is welcome, just as it is. You don't need to be cheerful every day. You don't have to be strong all the time. You are allowed to feel tired, to feel alone, and still be worthy of love. If this video touched something in you, a memory, a thought, a feeling, I invite you to share it in the comments. Not because you have to, but because someone else might be waiting to feel a little less alone. Sometimes, your quiet truth can be the light in someone else's dark moment. And if words aren't what you need right now, that's okay too. Maybe just carry this message with you. You still matter, even in the quiet, especially in the quiet. You are not fading. You are becoming something softer, wiser, and beautifully whole. Thank you for being here.